Welcome to the fourth hearing of the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. Thank you for being here today or tuning in via our Facebook live video. Today, the Commission meets to ponder important questions. How can we, as a country, create more national service opportunities? Our distinguished panel will discuss the options to support an expansion of national service in America, including possible options for new sources of funding, new program models, systems, infrastructure, and partnerships. While this morning's hearing explored how to improve the current system, this hearing is focused on the expansion of national service opportunities. National service is defined in the Commission's mandate as civilian participation in any non-governmental capacity, including private, for-profit, non-profit, and faith-based organizations that pursues and enhances the common good and meets the needs of communities, the states, or the nation in sectors related to security, health, care for the elderly, and other areas considered appropriate by the Commission. National service includes programs such as Peace Corps, Americorps, Senior Corps, and Youth Bill. The Commission is also looking to include faith-based, nonprofit, and private sector organizations to create additional service opportunities. Although between 80,000 and 85,000 individuals serve the nation through full-time Americorps or Peace Corps opportunities, and over 200,000 seniors participate in Senior Corps programs, the potential for service in a country of more than 329 million people remains largely untapped, and we know more Americans want to serve. In 2015, nearly a third of Americans, about 63 million, said they volunteered in their community through an organization. The 2013 survey conducted by the Aspen Institute found that 53% of voters aged 18 to 39 said they would be somewhat or very interested in participating in a full-time national service program. The seventh survey by the Aspen Institute found 55% of millennials surveyed reported they were definitely or very likely to participate in national service. So how can we ensure that there are more opportunities so that Americans that are inspired to serve can actually do so? The Commission is considering policy alternatives that expand existing sources or establish new and non-traditional sources of funding to provide more national service opportunities. The Commission is also considering the creation of new models and or systems that can be expanded to create more service opportunities. I hope that our panelists will address these important issues as directly as possible in their oral statements and in their responses to Commissioner questions. So let me welcome our panelists. We have Kaira, CEO of America's Service Commissions, Brian Larkin, Program Officer of Flint for the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Natalye, Esquire, President and CEO of Points of Might, Shirley Sagawa, CEO and founder of Service Year Alliance, and Jaime Ernesto, Uzeta, CEO of Public Allies. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd now like to yield the Vice Chair of the National Public Service, Mr. Kaira, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be brief. Just to welcome all of you here and to thank you very much for your our opportunity to engage with you on some of these important issues. We have before us great expertise, people who dedicated their lives to these important issues. So we thank you most sincerely for that. It's important to be here at the Bush School, Government and Public Service, certainly at Texas A&M. It will happen here this weekend. This big event happened really illustrates this university is engaging America's young people in important efforts to give back to the community. And certainly here at the Bush School, particularly as a former board member of Points of Light Foundation, certainly honoring President Bush in Mrs. Bush's legacy is one that we warmly embrace, and we welcome you here and look forward to the testimony. So this is a commission of purpose and interest, and we're very grateful for the thought leadership that's before us, and we look forward to the conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mark. So before we begin, let me explain how we will conduct today's hearings. The commissioners have all received your written testimony and will be entered into the official record. We ask that you summarize it to the extent possible in no more than 5 minutes, and speak to us from the heart about the issue you want us to know about the most. Before you will see our timing system. When the light turns yellow, you have approximately 1 minute remaining, and when it turns red, your time has expired. After all testimony is completed, we will move into questioning from the commissioners. Each commissioner will be given 5 minutes to ask a question and receive a response. Commissioners did very well in the last hearing. I hope that you keep on the same pattern in this hearing. Depending on time, we'll proceed with 1 and possibly 2 rounds of questions. Upon completion of commissioner questions, we will provide an opportunity for members members of the public who are in attendance to offer comments, either on the specific topic of today's hearing or any comments on the Commission's mandate at large. These comments will be limited to 2 minutes, light will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when time has expired. So, now we've got all the logistics out of the way, we can actually get the important stuff. So let's begin with our panelist testimony, and I'll begin with Uzeta.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Heck, and distinguished members of the Commission. Thank you today for the opportunity to provide input on recommendations to the Commission on military, national, and public service can make to create more national service positions. As the National Association of State Service Commissions, America's Service Commissions envisions a future in which all states embrace service as a strategy to build community and solving local challenges. The nation's 52 state service commissions are governor-appointed public agencies or nonprofit organizations that currently administer more than 80% of Americorps state and national grant funding from the Corporation for National and Community Service. The National Community Service Trust Act of 1993 explicitly created a state-federal government partnership responsible for connecting national service programming with communities tackling local needs. This partnership was again reaffirmed with the State Serve America Act of 2009. The involvement of governors and their state service commissions are key to the success of national service in the United States. State service commissions play a critical role in developing and supporting programs that address community needs. National service is indeed national and not just located in urban areas, in large part because of the role state service commissions play in making it accessible to small, rural, or underserved communities. This historically decentralized structure of Americorps State and National is in many ways what has led to its success through the years. Governors and state legislatures can play a significant role in establishing a culture of service in their respective states, including prioritizing civic education and service opportunities for K-12 students, allocating state funding to expand service opportunities that address state priorities, as well as providing further incentives to serve. In addition, governors can challenge their administrations to identify ways to incorporate service strategies in meeting the mission of their respective agencies. Any recommendations to improve and expand national service should emphasize the important role of states in implementation. Federal resources should be increased, federal policies that create barriers should be removed, and recommendations should improve state and local control of the federal resource. For the past 25 years, state governments through state service commissions have played a critical role in developing and expanding service opportunities. From expanding senior corps RSVP programming in Iowa to creating the statewide Marine Corps in Minnesota, state legislatures are continuing to invest financially in national service as a solution to meet pressing state needs. In Massachusetts, the state-funded Commonwealth Corps provides additional service opportunities beyond those provided by Americorps in the state. In addition to the many examples of the past, we see new legislation on the horizon, including proposals in California to expand Americorps to 10,000 members, as well as increase the value of the education award in the state. A proposal in New Hampshire to increase funding for Americorps programs serving low-income students, and a bill in Arizona that would provide a matching scholarship for Americorps members. Legislation is currently moving through the Nebraska state legislature to exempt the education award from state taxation, as is already the case in Iowa and Minnesota. Further, longstanding programs such as the Washington Vet Corps are sponsored by state agencies, in this case the Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs, to help those agencies meet their state mandates. In order to create more national service opportunities, we must recognize the need for funding to strengthen the infrastructure to support those additional opportunities. Although incredibly impactful, national service programs are not easy to operate, and adequate funding is necessary to ensure systems and supports are in place to ensure high-quality service opportunities. In our written testimony, we provided detailed recommendations for the Commission to consider to create more national service positions. In my remaining time, I will review some of those highlights. 1. Support continued and increased funding for Americorps State and National, along with appropriate increases in funding for state service commissions to administer these dollars at the state level. Program dollars alone will not result in increased service opportunities. Resources are needed for training, program development, monitoring, and staff capacity to develop and provide oversight of the programs in each state. 2. Support funding and implementation of the Serve America Fellows, as authorized by the Serve America Act of 2009. While already authorized, this initiative requires funding to launch in order to provide national service positions allocated to states through state service commissions to address emerging needs. 3. Provide annual increases to the cost per member service year, or MSY, for Americorps programs, to allow these programs to develop the infrastructure necessary to scale future expansions and to provide an annual cost of living increase for Americorps members. And 4, incentivize state investment by prioritizing access to national service positions for governors and state legislatures that allocate state resources for new service positions. In conclusion, as the Commission moves forward in its work, we urge you to strongly consider the role state government currently plays and can continue to play in managing federal resources to create effective and efficient opportunities for Americans to serve. Thank you for your work on this commission and the opportunity to provide input today.
Mr. Larkin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hack, and members of the Commission. Thank you for inviting me to testify. My name is Brian Larkin, and I'm an Associate Program Officer at the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, which is headquartered in my hometown of Flint, Michigan. My path to the foundation was rooted in service. When I was a new college graduate serving as a listed Americorps member, I discovered my future career and a passion for revitalizing Flint that has carried me through my professional journey thus far. I'm here because national service has been great for Flint, and I want to share something that's been key to that success. In 2011, leaders from Flint's nonprofit community, with support from the Mott Foundation, established the Flint National Service Accelerator. This was based on the growing sense that with more coordination, training, and community support, both the number and impact of Americorps members in our community could be greater. Housed at our local United Way, the Accelerator works with the Flint community in 4 ways. First, it provides capacity building support and other assistance that local nonprofits need to apply for, recruit, and train national service members. Secondly, the Accelerator works with the Community Foundation of Greater Flint to administer the National Service Fund. This fund offsets costs for organizations that host Americorps programs and members, such as local match requirements. This allows national service to be an option for organizations that otherwise wouldn't be able to cover the costs. The third component focuses on place-based solutions. Along with locally designed Americorps programs, the Accelerator identifies successful Americorps initiatives from across the country and brings them to the community to help to respond to ongoing and emerging needs. And finally, the Accelerator provides support to members and alumni to help them succeed during their term of service and beyond. The Accelerator has significantly increased the national presence in Flint. Starting in 2011, with just 1 Americorps program and 25 members, Flint now has 6 programs and approximately 200 members, addressing challenges in education, opioid abuse, public safety, and more. In addition to that, there are 3 senior corps programs with nearly 250 members served in the area. So we've gone from just 25 members to over 450 service members serving the community of Flint. That's an increase that has made a real difference in Flint, especially in the wake of the city's water crisis. Americorps members, including several NCCC teams, were among the first people on the ground distributing water, filters, coordinating volunteer efforts, and providing other critical services. Today, Americorps members continue to help with recovery efforts, from serving in Flint schools to support students and families, strengthening neighborhoods, helping residents get lead-mitigating foods, and assisting nonprofits through the newly created Flint Recovery Corps. The City of Flint Police also worked with the Accelerator and through Americorps NCCC teams during the past year. In a community that struggles with blight and crime, they boarded up over 600 homes, removed more than 51,000 pounds of trash, and distributed information packets, water filters, while reaching out to neighborhood groups. Together, their efforts contributed to a 15% decrease in violent crimes. The Accelerator has put Flint at the forefront of current efforts to create a place-based approach to national service. It continues to attract interest and is now being replicated in other cities and states. If the Commission seeks to draw other funders into public-private partnerships, I encourage you to tell them about the Mott Foundation experience. In 2018 alone, Mott Foundation grants of $645,000 leveraged approximately $2.6 million in additional support for national service in Flint. On behalf of the Foundation, I want to thank the Corporation for National and Community Service, its Michigan Field Office, and the Michigan Community Service Commission for their ongoing partnership and support. Flint would not be as far along in recovery efforts were it not for the dedicated and passionate members of Americorps and Senior Corps. I would like to close by inviting all members of the Commission to come and visit Flint and see a model that could be replicated in other communities nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Ms. Paquin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Heck and members of the Commission. Thank you for this opportunity to offer thoughts on behalf of our network to address the scope of national service and the importance of innovation in its expansion. Points of Light is the largest organization dedicated to volunteer service. Our mission is to inspire, equip, and mobilize individuals to take action that changes the world. We're excited to partner with the Commission on ideas for expanding national service. While I know you are considering a variety of factors and issues, it is my opinion that a critical factor to gaining support for national service and its expansion is to make it relevant. Up-and-coming generations, especially digital-first Generation Z, expect a continuum of options to engage, from traditional opportunities at nonprofits to using their time and talent to advocate for a cause. According to the Corporation for National and Community Service Volunteering in America report, 24.9% of Americans say they volunteer with a traditional nonprofit, while 62.5% say they help or are involved in other ways. Points of Light believes that national service is the backbone of the nonprofit sector. It drives a lifelong passion for service. It directly impacts communities, and it shows how we both can utilize and further develop skilled employees and volunteers. In a 2018 report issued by Verified Volunteers, where they surveyed 957 nonprofits of various sizes and missions across the United States, their client base, 56% of the nonprofits indicated that more than 75% of their workforce comes from volunteers. We believe that much of these volunteer resources would not be possible without national service members. As traditional service changes, we believe it's necessary to create a society where it's easy for every individual to make a difference and lend support to causes they care about. People are giving back in a full spectrum of ways. Each weekday, Points of Light recognizes an ordinary person doing extraordinary work with a daily Point of Light award. These honorees serve and give back to their communities in ways that are as innovative and diverse as they are. For example, Gabby Frost from North Wells, Pennsylvania, a teenager trying to combat teen suicide. She created an online community called Buddy Project, where people could make new friends, support one another, and become mental health advocates. Within 12 hours of its inception, 3,000 people signed up. 5.5 years later, more than 232,000 people have signed up for the Buddy Project. Her innovative ideas to reach youth where they are and to support them in ways they need could be viewed as a more contemporary example of service. It is not just ordinary citizens we should focus on. The private sector also has a role to play. The 2019 Element Trust Barometer shows that 76% of people surveyed says that CEOs should take the lead on change. Increasingly, the report shows that trust is shifting locally as people report that they hold more trust in their employer than in any single institution, with trust levels at 75% globally. As trust in the private sector continues to increase, that creates an opportunity for government to support private partnerships that make service more relevant and accessible. Recognizing the transformative role that private sector can play, in 2018, Points of Light and Starbucks piloted a Starbucks Service Fellows Program. This innovative employer-led program allowed Starbucks to invest in their employees, leverage untapped community talent, and deploy local resources to lift the community. Employees work 20 hours weekly at Points of Light network affiliates and the rest of the time in their local Starbucks store. In the 6 months, 36 fellows in 13 markets across the United States collectively provided more than 17 hours of community service. We believe in the power of programs like this to redefine the private sector's ability to support civic engagement. One of the fellows that I met really spoke out about the fact that her participation in this program, she uncovered new skills. She said, "I am a better partner for Starbucks." These types of employer-led programs invite new people to the world of service. We believe everyone has something to give, And we also believe that if you meet people where they are, they have a better opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Ms. Sagawa.
Thank you, Chairman, and all of the commissioners. Thank you for your service. I know this is a heavy lift and that you all have other responsibilities. And so appreciate the seriousness with which you've approached this topic. As you know, I'm the CEO of Service Share Alliance. Our mission is to make a year of service a common expectation and opportunity for all people growing up in America. And we do this by inspiring and equipping others to help build that infrastructure that's needed to make it happen. I'm not going to read my testimony. I'm going to just emphasize a handful of points that I want to leave you with. So one is, be bold. This is our moment. You don't get presidential elections all that often in which there's such a robust debate about what the future of our country is. This has got to be the future of our country. I've been doing this for 30 years. This is the most, often people say, service, that's so nice. Now people are saying it's necessary, our country's falling apart. And whether it's needing to rebuild communities, needing to find opportunities for young people to get on a pathway, to be able to be part of this robust economy, or to bring people together across divides. People are saying across all backgrounds that this is the time. Second, it will take legislation. It's not enough to just kind of tweak some of the problems in Americorps and keep growing incrementally. We need to be bold and envision a future that is much more comprehensive. So it's not just about increasing funding for one program, which I fully support. Please increase funding for one program, but build the infrastructure that you would need to make it an expectation to serve, to have young people do that service and meet people across programs. Right now, that's the exception, not the rule. Make it possible for people to transition out of service into the career of their dreams or college in a way that's much, we do a lot of that work because it's one of our mission, our goals, but it is very limited what's able to be done top down. So that brings me to my third point, which is please think about place as a model, a way to model what you're looking for in terms of universal service. You can't boil the ocean. We got to start somewhere. We're working with 10 communities right now, about to add another 10 that are, Flint is one of them, that are trying to put all these pieces together in a way that the expectation is created, that programs are connecting across lines, that the transition is very strong, and that alumni are engaged in a way that is, it protects the investment that we've put into these people. The piece that we really want to see is connecting the military and civilian sides. Why not have military veterans serving alongside the National Service Corps members? Why not recruit together? We've talked a lot about that. I put into the record our Enlisting America pledge, which was signed by many leaders in the military, calling for civilian national service. Because they think there are a lot of people who aren't going in the military who ought to be doing something too. So it's not to equate the two, it's to say everybody should give. We're giving a lot, you guys should do something. Another point I wanted to make is we need to make this possible for people of all backgrounds. Super easy. I can create a program tomorrow if you're going to give me a whole bunch of highly competitive school graduates and let me hire them for very little money to do something impactful. Easy program to create. Can do that. We can do that. It's really hard to get to make sure that if we are engaging young people who have barriers to work, that they're going to be engaged productively in a way that's meaningful to them and makes a difference. If we want everyone to have the chance to serve, that means people who are getting out of prison. It means people who are disabled. It means people who have dropped out of school and don't have literacy levels. It means people who don't speak English. It means people who are aging out of foster care, and we need more supports to make it possible for more people to serve. We've got some proposals around that. Finally, I want to stress two other things quickly. One is the private sector is a really important part of this. It can't be done just with the private sector, but if you do things inadvertently to squelch private sector action, as sometimes occurs, that's not good either. Many of the greatest new programs are being created outside of Americorps, and some of the historically strongest programs are not funded by Americorps. So if you create a Americorps-centric system, you're leaving out a lot of other programs. Finally, I just want to say, in your report, don't lose us in the details. Please make bold recommendations and make them simply on principle. And yet, it's great that you have so much analysis being done, and that'll come in handy. But if that's the report, people are going to get lost. So please make sure that you don't lose forest for the trees. Our headlines are, everyone can and should serve regardless of their background. Everyone should be able to choose if and where to serve, including both military and civilian national service. Full-time national service should be rewarded with increased opportunity. Government support is necessary and not sufficient and should leverage private sector resources and engage communities. And we need the infrastructure to make this vision possible. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ms. Sagawa. Mr. Uzeta.
Thank you.
I love that.
Chairman Heck and distinguished members of the Commission, thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Jaime Uzeta, and I serve as CEO of Public Allies. Founded in 1992 as one of the original Americorps programs, Public Allies is a national network of organizations and individuals working to create a more just and equitable world. We do so by developing inclusive leaders, innovating cultures, and transforming communities. We believe that leadership is an action that anyone can take, not a role that only a few can hold, and that lasting change can only come when citizens of all backgrounds step up, take responsibility, and work together. At the core of our work is our 10-month Americorps Apprenticeship program, which we implement in 25 cities throughout the country. Our apprentices, whom we call allies, are recruited mostly from historically underserved and underrepresented communities. We see as assets young people who are too often defined by deficits, and we empower them to transform their lives, their futures, and their communities. Our allies are over 80% people of color, more than 60% women, 60% low income, and 25% LGBTQ. Our staff reflects a significant racial and ethnic diversity as well. Our apprentice and staff alumni network is 8,000 strong and includes CEOs, heads of foundations, elected officials, and a former First Lady. The Public Allies Apprenticeship is an experiential journey of self-discovery, professional development, and community service. Allies are placed within a nonprofit organization or a government agency where they help build that group's capacity to address a broad range of critical issues such as education and workforce development and environmental issues. And in the course of service, allies are responsible for recruiting and engaging upwards of 50,000 volunteers and establishing partnerships with over 4,500 different organizations annually. As a result of their service activities, the collaborations developed, and the additional volunteers engaged, an annual average of 150,000 people are able to receive services that they otherwise would not. For our Americorps members, the service placement serves as a practicum in an entry-level professional position. They develop the project management and interpersonal skills that are required to succeed in professional positions, and they begin to identify their own strengths as leaders. Members also develop a sense of collaboration, networking skills, key relationships that can open up doors of opportunity way beyond their Public Allies experience. The service being delivered by Public Allies or the allies themselves is enhanced by a rigorous 200-hour leadership and professional development curriculum addressing topics ranging from career readiness and nonprofit management to group dynamics, conflict resolution, and cultural competence. This equips members with the content knowledge necessary to be successful in the nonprofit sector, the soft skills required to succeed in the 21st century workplace, and the opportunity to reflect on how social issues such as poverty and poor education and homelessness impact their own identities and their communities. Looking forward, we applaud the Commission for the many ideas it's already exploring and that are seen in the interim report, such as increasing the living stipend for those participating in national service programs and providing an expanded educational award for each year of national service completed. In addition to those ideas, we encourage the Commission to examine how national service can continue to expand its impact in the following ways. One, encouraging greater national service participation from underserved communities. We believe that true change happens when young people with closest proximity to the community's problems are supported to create solutions informed by their personal experience. Two, diversifying the types of organizations that can engage with national service. It is imperative that we broaden the number of publicly supported national service opportunities so that all who wish to serve can serve. And three, incentivizing the engagement of non-traditional participants in service, such as opportunity youth and formerly incarcerated citizens returning to communities. These non-traditional participants are often the most overlooked when organizations are seeking volunteer talent. Service programs focusing on this population, such as Public Allies and others, are capable of providing the supports necessary to ensure this population of volunteers can find success, but these delivery models frequently cost more per participant, and that clearly needs to be taken into consideration when making grant decisions. Over the years, we've learned that national service can act as a powerful engine for the self-determination and transformation not only of individuals but of from underserved backgrounds, but of entire communities. And at a time when trust in each other and in our institutions is at a historic low, we think we should do all we can to help renew Americans' faith in the common good. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify about the role of national service and in building long-term commitments to communities while also meeting the development needs of our diverse and evolving workforce.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. We'll now turn to questions from the commission, and I'll start at 1 o'clock. So we hear the debate over growing the number of positions. That Serve America Act of 2009 talked about going from 75,000 to 250,000 over 8 years, or roughly a growth rate of 25,000 per year. Service years talk about increasing that rate to 100,000 per year, but and we've heard, it's not just about money to fund positions, but the money into the infrastructure that supports the positions, right, to be successful. So I'm going to ask each of you briefly to state, what do you think is an adequate growth rate of numbers of positions that can be supported by the infrastructure growth? What kind of rate are we getting?
Thank you, Chairman Heck. So I would definitely say that growth is an important part of this, absolutely. And as my verbal testimony as well as my written testimony really emphasize, the infrastructure piece I think is critically important. What we don't want to have happen is there be an influx of interest and not have appropriate positions out there to do it. And so I want to make sure that we're thinking about supply and demand on this as well. And I think that's a really important piece here. So I would say certainly, the Serve America Act, when we thought about 25,000 positions a year, that seemed pretty aggressive at that point in time. I agree with Shirley's point about being bold. I think it's important. This is the time to do it. But I think we need to get a little bit far in advance of that to make sure that when we do bring on those new, if it's 10,000, if it's 25,000 positions, we have organizations that are prepared to host those members, whether they be through the federal resource or other resources as well. So I would say certainly we see a lot of program development efforts currently with state service commissions to try to get the next crop out there. So I think that if we continue those efforts, we could look at 10,000, 25,000 members a year. I think that that is doable. But again, that investment in developing the infrastructure is going to be an important component to do that.
Mr. Larkin?
So as you mentioned, when Service Year Alliance recommended that the federal government expand into the 100,000 members serving annually, I think what we really support is kind of that long-term goal, and I think that's why everyone is here, of, let's look at 2025. Let's look down the road. And if we're going to have 1 million Americans engaged in national service, then it's going to take bold, and it's going to take those type of numbers. We aren't going to get there incrementally, recognizing along the way then what are the challenges and pieces that are holding us back, or what are some of the obstacles in that place. So one, I think the number is very doable, but then also, I think from just a perspective of the climate that is around service, Americans are in agreement that increasing funding for national service is a priority. I mean, it's historically bipartisan, it's politically popular, it's a proven strategy. There was a Target Point consulting found that 83% of voters support maintaining or increasing the federal investment in national service. So it's not a hugely controversial issue, so I think it's the time and opportunity to go after something ambitious.
Thanks.
Yes. Oh, well, we agree with our colleagues, and we think that whether the number is 25,000 or 100,000, the key is really investing in the infrastructure and making sure that organizations are ready for our citizens' service. So we don't have a particular opinion on what the actual growth rate should be. We think that growth is important, and it's more important to just stay focused on the fact that you want to grow and that the infrastructure needs to be there to support it.
Just to be clear, we think 25,000 a year is the right number. I think there might be a little confusion. And we've done some surveying of the existing field to understand what the absorption factor is. We can probably double the number of people serving to about 150 with 1,000 without doing too much to the infrastructure. If you want to go beyond that, a few things are necessary. One is to really build out place-based infrastructure so that there are ways that you can get some economies of scale across different programs, sharing resources, et cetera. Doing some fellowships so that their young people themselves can make choices about where to go is a really important piece, especially to bring in some of the smaller organizations. We believe certification system will unlock innovation. We have one. I know state commissions are interested in doing it as well. The accelerator that you heard about in Flint, there should be one in every community, and we've had a lot of interest on the part of other communities to replicate that. And then finally, we do a lot of work with organizations that are interested in starting programs. We're doing one now in humanities. We've been working on an ocean core. We've been working on a core relating to leadership and aging. And we've done a whole report on all the different areas where you could do it. So it's really a matter of providing more technical assistance to organizations.
Yeah, I think I'd want to just echo what I heard. I mean, I think things like the National Service Accelerator are excellent models and thinking from a place-based perspective, and that's certainly the way we're thinking of public allies and thinking to what extent can we measure success beyond just the allies that are out there? Is there a way of moving the needle in a way that would hold us accountable in the communities that we serve within a specific period of time? So that, in general, I think is where the place-based component I think is really important. The one more piece I would add to it is just the recognition. We talked a little bit about this, but depending on it really depends when you're trying to expand these numbers, what kinds of folks we're bringing into the program. And when you get when you're reaching out to more diverse audiences, you have to or members or potential service members, you have to recognize there are lots of additional challenges that other young people, opportunity youth, and others, and not just necessarily opportunity youth, folks from lower socioeconomic backgrounds have. So they have bigger challenges, things that we have not even anticipated, and we still learn from all the time when we're trying to do this outreach, and even with our, a variety of our programs. So bottom line is there's always these extra layers that get more complicated when you're reaching out to harder to reach and harder to bring in communities. So I would just urge you to keep that in mind when we start thinking about whether it's 25,000 per year or another number. The infrastructure is really essential. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me build on our chair's question of scaling and turn to higher education. This is the higher education wing, both on college presidents and federal work study. And many of you have advocated an increase in federal work study as increasing opportunities for community engagement. So it gets to the question of scale and place. And so I'd be interested in your reactions to that percentage of increasing federal work study, 7% to 25%. What are the dimensions of that? What would you see as some of the barriers? Shirley, you pulling that? You bold, Shirley. Give me a bold answer.
So that proposal's been around for decades, as you know. And what happens every time it comes up is the university community says, oh no, we need those people to do stuff in the schools. You're going to raise the cost of education. And then we look at the statistics and we realize that most schools that are doing community service and work study are already doing over 25%. So it would actually result in no net increase in the number of schools that are doing it and yet bring out all of the opposition. So I would propose that you do something like, or propose something like, if you are willing to put X percent, 50%, 75%, a bigger percent of your work study funding into community service, you get more money. So there's more of an incentive, and an incentive to kind of really invest in a significant way. And some of the proposals even the administration has made around making it more about work-based learning, we would think engaged learning, service learning, all of the above are good. We'd really love to see universities do service years as a part of their curriculum. It's been hard to get them to do it though.
We would add to not look at it in terms of increase, the percentage that you want to increase, but look at it in terms of universities are members of communities, and is there a problem within that community that the university would like to lean in and help solve? And can they lean in and help solve that problem through the support of their students? And which students would be more interested in? And then take that approach to help design a program where you would get more students engaged. And so we would really encourage universities to be more impact and outcome focused as opposed to simply considering what percentage should be dedicated into a particular area.
I would echo the sentiments of Ms. Paquin. I was thinking, in our testimony, we identified the numbers, how much in the city of Flint we've seen an increase in number of members, but the real impact is the ability to address issues in new ways, and for the accelerator, really the kind of the focus or target of the accelerator is the community of Flint. And so universities are a big portion of the communities in which they reside. And the question that is posed here is really, how can they best utilize their resources through service to support the community at large? And so if that is through a specific number or percentage as you identify, then great. But if there's other means or mechanisms, they're a part of that community as a whole. And when we're thinking about solving the community, you can't do it without one of your biggest partners.
And does the accelerator have work study as part of the mix?
I'm not sure. I have to check back and I can get you the official answer.
Yeah.
I would just, again, add to what my fellow panelists shared. I mean, I do think that the partnership piece here is really critically important, so I don't know that there's a certain percentage that we want to target. I think the more college students are out in the community, I think that is a good experience for them, both for the community itself as well as for those students. But I think the partnership piece is critical here, because I think the other thing that we want to make sure too is that those college students are having good experiences too, that they actually see this as a stepping stone to do further service, that they're not having a poor quality experience and therefore say, you know what, I tried that in college, I didn't like that, and therefore I don't want to do it anymore. So I think we want to kind of think on the flip side about that as well. And so it's really important that we're investing in partnerships and making sure that the nonprofit partners, assuming that most of these positions will be with nonprofit partners, are also in a position to accept and really embrace those college students as well.
Great.
Well, in the previous panel, we talked about how do we get the military and national service community to better work together so we can raise all boats. And coming from your perspective, the flip side, right? We have a number of military service members who leave the service every year, looking to transition into their next lives. How do we do a better job in terms of, are there barriers or are there any issues that we should be aware of as we try to make sure that service members who are leaving the service understand there are opportunities like yours in communities across this country? And how do we best make sure that we are integrating veterans and service members into your programs? I'll open it up to you.
I'll start. I'm sure everybody has other ideas. I think a big challenge is awareness. So when people are leaving the military, I'm not sure they know that this is an option that they can pursue. We do know from research that civilian service is extremely powerful as a transition strategy, and it is what a lot of transitioning veterans want, but they don't know. So, we've thought about trying to use our platform to tag positions that are especially great for transitioning veterans as one solution, but something that would be valuable would, I think that there could be some kind of an incentive fund to ask programs to especially target veterans and to make sure that any kinds of additional supports they might need could be available. Often also veterans like to support other veterans, so what we've seen in the programs that are out there is a lot of them do have a peer-to-peer kind of dimension to it, which is really a powerful way to kind of serve both veterans in two different ways.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We'll add to that is to invite them. We know the number one reason why people volunteer or service because they're invited. And I worked about 15 years in education, and when we were trying to get parents more engaged in, coming to programs, we had to actually extend invitations. And what we learned in education is notification is not an invitation. So getting a flyer doesn't mean that you think it's for you, right? So the first thing we would say is invite them. The second is to really help volunteers or veterans understand their impact. Because if you understand your impact, you're likely to come back and then give them a good experience. Be prepared for them when they show up. And so those will be some of the strategies that we would suggest, not just for veterans, but for any underserved or hard to reach community and getting them more engaged.
I think those are great answers. Just one more piece. I mean, I think building on what Ms. Paquin is saying, if you're reaching out to folks who are serving the military and they're coming in and they have similar challenges that others from underserved communities have, the infrastructure has to be there again. So I think some of the things that the Commission's already considering in terms of increasing living wage, those would certainly come into play if we were wanting to reach out and bring more folks from the military into the national service. I'm realizing that because we have our 20 operating partners throughout the country, I want to go and see what else we have done and how we've experimented with that and see what we've gotten in terms of feedback. But the point of just inviting them on a very basic level and giving a sense of belonging, that's a huge theme in everything that we do. It's just, again, it's the invitation and seeing somebody that you identify with also participating and feeling that embrace is just key. So that's what I'm at.
And I would just quickly add one more thing from my experience in California. One of the interesting things we found in trying to think about how do we get veterans into national service programs was also thinking about spouses. And so often that was an interesting way to expose military or veterans to the idea of doing national service was actually engaging their spouses in national service themselves, and that actually helped them raise awareness and also then made that connection for them about the idea that national service and military service are complementary as well.
Just really quickly, we worked also to try to make it an allowable use for the GI Bill. I think there are some pros and cons there, but that is another thing that you should look at, because when you can use GI Bill resources for training, this is the kind of training, and it's in some ways a more appealing kind of training than some of the things that are available.
Thank you very much.
Ms. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you for coming and sharing your time with us today. I'm going to ask this question of Ms. Esgate, but all of you might be interested in your thoughts. So the goal of the Commission is every American inspired and eager to serve. And we've talked a lot about young Americans and youth. And I'd like to broaden that a little bit. In the previous panel, we talked about senior Americans, and there are certainly programs for senior Americans. But we've also heard about some of the challenges for engaging senior Americans. So, and one of them is about competitive grant programs. And so I'd be interested in your thoughts on whether restructuring the competitive grant models so that they're available to foster grandparents and senior companions, would that be something that would help the senior programs? And I'm just interested if there are any other suggestions that you or any of the other panel members would have in your work with the senior Americans and getting them more involved, because just like with our youth, we have more and more senior Americans who retire from the more traditional workforce that want to do something, and they're an untapped resource.
Certainly. So many of our state commissions actually work with senior corps programs within their states. Actually, there are a couple of states that actually provide state funding to expand the existing senior corps programs that are federally funded. So I think that there's something that is interesting there as well. And I think that the issue is maybe not necessarily the competitive grant process, but really emphasizing innovation. So I do think that we need to think about the models right now. I think many of the models for our senior corps programs are 30 years old, or actually more than 30 years old at this point. And so I think what individuals were looking for back then and what they're looking for now, I think has changed. So there are some other senior service models that are out there that are really trying to take the professional skills that folks had in their careers and really reapply that in new settings. And so I think that that's interesting to think about that. In the Serve America Act, there was actually an Encore Fellow concept, which really would take individuals 55 and older and encourage them to devote a year of service. And so it's a twist on kind of the existing senior corps programs that are out there, but again, is connected to that national service infrastructure. structure. So I think it's really, from my perspective, it's more about looking at innovative models, more so than necessarily thinking about competitive grants for the existing program. So I would encourage the commission to think about that idea as you want to engage more seniors. I think we certainly want to do that. The other thing too that I think is, many of us know this, but we forget about it too, is that there is no upper age limit on Americorps, right? So individuals, we know of Americorps members that are in their 90s. And I think one of the fun things that we did with the Serve America Act as well is make the education award transferable to children and grandchildren as well, because before there wasn't necessarily an incentive. You do a year of service as an older American, and then what are you going to do with that education award? Maybe that doesn't make sense for you, but for a grandchild, that might be something that's very attractive to you as well. So I think it's kind of looking at some of those things. Can we make tweaks here and there? But I do think that the innovation piece is going to be really important moving forward.
Any other thoughts?
I would just add, we're looking at that and exploring partnerships with, strategic partnerships with organizations that focus primarily on the aging and seeing how we can bring them into national service. But there's a challenge that we see, and that we see not just with them, again, it goes with folks from different backgrounds, is even placing sometimes some of these allies in nonprofits can be challenging, right? So there's a perception issue that we have to deal with on the other side, on the demand side, that is something that marketing could potentially address, but it's something that has to be part of the solution. So even if we're trying to bring in, the aging into national service on a greater level, and as well as with some of these other folks that we're talking about, not to blend everybody together, but opportunities, etc. The placement themselves, the nonprofits have to shift their own perception of what it's like to bring folks in and select them as the volunteers as part of the matching process.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Davis?
Great, thank you. Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate your sharing your perspectives and your expertise, your experience with us. We talked a little bit about work study, and I think we'll focus on higher ed a little bit more. Can you all share some of your best practices or examples of how your organizations have partnered with higher education institutions to catalyze service, or to either coming in or going out, or while students are in school? Just some of your thoughts on those partnerships.
You go ahead.
I can kick it off. We're doing some things. There are a lot of things actually. We work with higher education institutions as both our operating partners who actually implement our program, and then in negotiating college credit for the apprenticeship. In Los Angeles, for example, we work with LA Trade Tech, and we've actually created a course around the leadership development components that we focus on, so that we can give more young people access to it even if they weren't actually in public allies. But there's so much more to be done, and I think the biggest barrier ends up being financial, and thinking about, I think, a lot of things that the commission's already considering, and in terms of relieving the financial burden is key. And I'll mention one of the things that we've experienced. We have a pathways program, and when the ally comes in, they have three different choices. One is continuing on, going on to a career, continuing going into higher education, or doing a second year of service. And based on what they say, we try to customize their experience and give them exposure that would help them accelerate their pathway, right? And it's been successful in the sense that 90% of our alumni are within 90 days in the pathway. But one of the things that we can factor for is the blurred line between working and taking higher education. That pathway as an option. So increasingly, the majority actually has to be both. And so then we start talking about, again, it's looking at community colleges and different ways of kind of working around it. And that's something that we're iterating around and trying to figure out different solutions to.
We've done a ton of stuff. I know that we've really cracked this yet. We did a toolkit with a whole bunch of different ways that higher ed institutions could support the service year movement, everything from recruiting to placing to creating programs. So that toolkit I'm happy to share. We had a partnership in Virginia under the leadership of First Lady Dorothy McCall to have every university and college in Virginia do something in toolkit, which we thought was pretty successful. We had, we've done a course with ASU, it's an online course in their public service program, so that any Corps member can learn sort of history and ethic of service, and if they want to get credit, they pay at the end, and I'm not sure the details, but we did that. And we also have a variety of recruitment efforts aimed at colleges. We did a competition for 2 years to try to get higher ed institutions to create service year programs that were credit bearing and part of the curriculum. And we had winners in 3 categories each year, and some of them were really interesting. Community nursing program, an innovation program between the University of Pittsburgh Law School and Business School. So there were some kind of cool things that came out of it, but we also felt a little bit like that was our hardest lift.
For us, excuse me, for us, we would actually take a different spin on what universities can do. And actually at Points of Light, one of the things that we struggle with is we struggle with academic research with real data that proves a point, that responds to a question. And we know today information is really a prime asset, and we don't have enough thoughtful research. And so what we would ask universities to do is really think about the service movement, think about it from an employer's perspective, from an employee's perspective, from a nonprofit perspective, from community benefits perspective, longitudinal research, case studies, articles. I mean, there are many ways that universities could lend their intellectual power to educating, advancing, and helping to inspire the public about why this is so important.
To echo some of the conversations and ideas expressed earlier, it's beyond just higher education trying to produce numbers of service members, and more to really understanding what are the service needs of the community. So again, going back to that place-based approach, in Flint having the accelerator, the platform is there that the university can approach and say, okay, if the challenge, for instance, is a safety one, where you're looking at a community and the board ups and things I mentioned, that, okay, let's help develop an urban safety core, and okay, our contribution to this can be X, Y, Z. So for another core that was established that works in our K-12 schools, okay, well then now here's an opportunity to integrate for students who are studying in higher education, looking on to education. It's not really taken with the lens of higher education needs to come and address this in a certain way. It's here's the platform, here's the table, how can you bring those resources? And then that way it can sustain longer, because as you know, with higher education, there's changes in tenure, there's changes in priorities, but if they are integrated into a system that's addressing a challenge, and they're either providing the manpower at this place or providing the resources at that time or providing the convening space, then that way it's something that's able to sustain much longer, and their contributions have a greater impact.
And then quickly, just to add, I also encourage you to think about higher ed institutions as infrastructure. So we have a number of state service commissions that actually provide grants. And particularly in rural states, an institution of higher education has the systems in place to deal with all of the paperwork that needs to be done, the financial pieces that need to be done. So they're actually able to be a community partner that is able to place members throughout the state or particular region. And you don't have to find a small nonprofit to try to do that, but there's also the scaling that the institution of higher education can assist with. So I think it's also an interesting place. It's not just engaging students as members, but also what role the university can play in actually supporting members and out in the field as well.
Yeah, that seems pretty common in rural areas, and our 2 rural place-based sites are based out of universities.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for being here, and I'll address my question to Ms. Esgate and Mr. Larkin. Every community has a need for firefighters and police officers, EMT, strong, robust efforts in those service opportunities. What is the relationship between national service organizations working to encourage those community service opportunities, and if they're not that robust, does the opportunity exist in that area?
a number of our state commissions are working in what we call disaster space, so really trying to work with their emergency management agencies, and there's programs at the local level that are working with local fire, police, et cetera, to really kind of find those synergies there. So I think there's more opportunity there without a doubt. We know that some of the Americorps members around the country are actually trained as CERT volunteers, so Certified Emergency Response Team volunteers. So that is a curriculum, I believe is 20 hours, I can double check that though, where they basically understand how they can actually help augment first responder efforts in times of need in particular communities as well. So I think that there's some stuff that's happening there right now, but I think that there's more opportunity for those to be connected further, and for us to continue to invest in national service programs that do have a disaster or public safety realm in them. Public safety is a funding area certainly, but it's not one where we typically see a lot of programs around the country, so I think that there can be further partnerships and outreach in order to make that connection more fully.
And as I mentioned in my testimony, that there are ways to find direct partnerships between police or fire and safety, but it has to be understood on what are your goals. And so, for instance, in the Flint example, there was, okay, well, let's identify targeted areas where we know there's a lot of activity coming on. And police has a certain role, it has a certain law enforcement activity, but then after that, what's next? And so as we developed our urban safety core strategy, the police would come in targeted areas, get it, address a lot of the issues that are within their authority, but then what are the environmental issues that are behind it? So that's why you see the 600 plus board ups, the 51,000 tons of debris removed, and now you're communicating to your community at large that this is not an area where it's okay to do these sorts of activities. Because in the public safety aspect, criminal activity kind of looks at environmental clues for where these things can and can't occur. And so service steps in that place. It's not stepping in per se to fight crime, but it's stepping in place to serve the community, to uplift, and to put a new brand, a new image on it. And so that's one direct example. But there's others, and I think it really stems from identifying and having them at the table. So we had our police chief at the table to really identify, well, hey, this is what we need. And kind of this is how it's shaped. And because the accelerator was in place, it wasn't a case of having to go to figure out which nonprofit organization can then go and get the service members to say, hey, this is my challenge. Where does this fit in? Is there an existing core that we need to create a new one?
So, as I understand your answers, it sounds to me like an event happens, there's a crisis of some kind, and there's a response to it. But there seems to be perhaps more opportunity in the space where a young person says, I'd like to do a 6-month or 1-year internship with a fire department or a police department. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would think that in most cases, it's not necessarily that we have a direct line. We're not necessarily pipelining folks into those careers. So I think that that's something that, I think there's potential there, absolutely, but I think that that's not something that we've seen a lot of programming, at least that I'm familiar with. But I can certainly see that opportunity, and folks could be doing community outreach. They could get better understanding the needs of the community in that area, and that can then lead them to a career in fire, police, et cetera. But I'm not aware of a lot of programming that looks like that at this point in time.
There's a new one in Fairfax County, Virginia, with the police that might be worth looking into. But I appreciate your responses on that. Thank you all.
Ms. Haynes?
Really appreciate your point that as we expand, we need to think about how do we actually get to communities in the sense that where we need to encourage participation, in particular in service, and attract folks to service who have been underserved in a sense in these areas, and whether it's low income or formerly incarcerated persons or tribal areas or a whole series of rural spaces, et cetera. Others have mentioned some of these issues. And I guess using Shirley's guidance of think bold, what is sort of the most kind of important, critical, innovative thinking that you imagine idea that the federal government could do to encourage and to essentially promote that kind of participation? And I'd like it from all of you, but yeah, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm for you to start, please.
Oh,
yeah.
So on the innovation side, I would say a couple things. I mean, there are a couple principles around it, but I would say just starting with idea of being innovative around it. I would think that and something that historically hasn't been something that the government has been able to do as well, having been serving the federal government as well, is just the idea of iterating around a range of experiments towards that end, right? So it's when we're thinking, I mean, there's a marketing sort of approach to this that would be required in that kind of default, just because my background and going towards that and thinking about how you appeal to young people. And it's recognizing that with any sort of marketing strategy, you're going to need to segment and recognize what the different audience looks like, different members of the audience look like, and which of their needs, what their need states are, and how you're going to move each of them, right? When I was talking earlier about this sense of belonging, it's just really fundamental to so much of this, because it's this idea, do you see somebody coming into your neighborhood to help you? And this is in the imaging and the messaging, and what does it look like that they see out there in the ethos? Or do they see themselves helping their own community? And it seems simple and obvious, but it's a shift there. And if they can opt out because it's an other type dynamic, then they're not going to embrace it. And if you think of, I mean, I just think back to the beginning of Americorps and kind of the initial notion of it. It's kind of bringing the best and the brightest into to a commitment to civic duty, and that's still the case. But there's also the recognition of what does best and brightest look like, and being broader in terms of how we interpret that and how we convey our interpretation of that. So I would think in the federal government level, I think that there's it's about partnerships, and it's about thoughtful marketing and messaging, and the messaging has to be reflected in the policies themselves. And so it's not a simple sort of answer, but to the earlier point just about the innovation piece, it's being broad and being bold and recognizing, look, here's the way the landscape has changed since we first started this program. Here's what our goal is, and here are the series of hypotheses we have in terms of how we might be able to bring more people into it, and testing a variety of approaches. And there's some programs like the P3 program, for example, that allows that provides federal funding, but allows you to be folks at a more local level to be flexible about how they blend pools of funding to really meet those needs. That nimbleness is critical, I would say, to helping to shift this so that you really cast a wider net and bring more people into the fold.
Yeah, I think that there's a real benefit to, in a policy sense, if there's going to be, for example, funding for communities to build out a community-wide plan, is that you incentivize or require that they take into account how are they going to engage these harder to engage populations. And that I think experimentation is natural in a setting where you let local communities make plans. So we're going to learn, one community might set up an emergency fund because we know a lot of people with limited incomes, if they have to move, they can't put security deposit down, and you need an emergency fund, or their car breaks down and they can't get there, so and another community might decide to pursue a housing solution, and we would learn a lot from that instead of imposing right from the beginning, here are all the answers. So I would really urge to try to build it around that sort of a community incentivized plan.
I was in the back this morning and I heard one of the commissioners use the term awareness, aspiration, and access. Was that Sean? And I wrote that down because it really resonated with me. And so when I think of bold, right, we think about the fact that we all live digital lives. So service and awareness of service and increasing aspiration and access, maybe some way through technology. When we think about how you reach youth, perhaps it's gamification. I know in Philadelphia they're opening a new stadium. It's like an e-stadium for virtual games around the world. So imagine if we really thought about being bold. Imagine the government creating games, creating VRs, creating all types of technology solutions that was just distributed free the key concept was really around service, and you had upgrades and incentives, and perhaps your national or international winners could actually cash in incentives for all types of things, through partnerships. And so, I would say that bold thinking has to include digital solutions, and delivery has to be innovative through technology.
The key innovation, I would say, that really we supported, and this will come as no surprise, is the accelerator model. I think as communities are trying to identify their own solutions and challenges, it's a model that's flexible. It's one that lifts up the strengths of a community, but then also identifies how to support those and bring them along the way, and can be really flexible in space. So if there was one thing at the top of the list, it would say kind of federally promoting is supporting accelerator model.
And just quickly, I would say flexibility. I think, when we think about kind of federal funds and really if we're talking about going bold, we're going to have to do things differently. And so I think that flexibility to maneuver, to think about how we're combining federal resources, state resources, local resources in new ways, creative ways, in order to support that, I think is really, really important. And the other thing I would just say as well, I think some of the most impactful programs that I have seen are actually recruiting members from the local communities, because that's where it really resonates. And that really folks are much more open to receiving the service, depending on what that service may be. And also it builds that culture of service and that understanding what it means to commit a year of service in that local community as well. So I think that that's really important too, as we're thinking about bringing in new populations to the idea of doing a year of service. It's really important too that those that are serving are actually from that same community.
Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the panel, my first chance. Thank you very much for being here today. Research suggests that national service alumni who serve gain hard and soft skills through their service. One of the things it's been told to us, I think just here today, that we bring a unique, if not first, holistic look at different forms of service under the same lens. I know that I personally took it as a learning moment when I participated in a trip to a military FORCOM with some of our staff and talked to senior academics there. And then later, as group commissioners, we had a conversation with an executive at LinkedIn talking about the workforce. And they both made almost the exact same point, which really struck me about how the new economy is difficulty in identifying people with skills and finding places where people come out with skills to solve problems of all kinds, predominantly soft skills, but also linking those with hard skills. Generally, you can take someone with soft skills and give them hard skills, but that both were thinking about those things in the context of public service and the military piece of public service and in the pure economy really struck me. And Mr. Uzeta, I'd like to start with you, please, since you mentioned pathways. How do we get people to understand that pathways can be devised, do exist, that develop skills that matter to the economy post-service, to the individual and to the economy as a whole? Get that employer partnership, that corporate partnership, as well as the influencers, if not the decision makers, such as people in Congress when we talk about we need legislation to do big, bold things, get them to understand that there are real benefits to service in that way, how pathways matter with regard to skills in the economy.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a big one, I think, on a couple levels. I think one, the question is how do we get others to recognize the impact? I would say we're looking at it two ways as public allies. So as I mentioned, we think that the allies already get 21st century skill development, interpersonal skills, and project management, a lot of things that the folks at LinkedIn and others would think about. But there's even more to be done on that level, and we're actually looking at our whole curriculum, and we've done a survey on the future of work and what we call future of citizenship, and where do we need to bolster our own curriculum to add creative problem-solving skills, for example. So there's more to be done on our end too, and I think elevating those stories, though, in terms of if you do this analysis, if you look at what the Global Economic Forum or any of these groups are looking at, you can peel back the layers, and so much of what exists right now in those future of work studies is embodied if you break down all the different components, interdisciplinary skills and others that, even though we want to enhance it more, there's a lot of creative problem-solving skills and the ability to work across communities communities and sectors is very much part of the whole national service experience. And so that is, the world is coming more towards national service on that level, right, than national service having to go towards the world in terms of the skill set. So I think a lot of this is around, it goes back to the messaging and marketing, and it's not just some advertising, it's convenience, and how do you start building these bridges between the sectors so that there are connections. And maybe it's not about here's how national service helps, it creates a better employee that you should consider to bring into your organization. Maybe it's on other subjects and you kind of weave that into convenings that already exist. Does that make sense? It's not necessarily on that specific subject, but find out where anything that's having to do with the workforce is going on and making sure that national services is present at every single one of those, and so it reframes the perception, because so much of it is a mental model shift that's required. And so and as I was saying earlier, it's not just required in terms of what happens to the alumni, and they themselves need to help and understand how their service can connect for job opportunities, the alumni of public allies, but it's also the organizations themselves understanding how these young people have skills that are unique. So that's, I'm happy to go into a bigger discussion about what that might look like concretely, but those are just the broad principles I would say.
Thank you. Anyone else? I would just add, that there's some workforce fields for which service is already a major pipeline, and that doesn't get recognized in a lot of the conversations that we have about workforce development. So it's not at the table when there's a meeting of people talking about the future of work, when in fact 10% of employees are nonprofits, for example, and this is a huge pipeline for nonprofit employees. There's also a lot of programs. There's a lack of programs in some areas where there ought to be a ton, like early childhood. We know we're going to need a big early childhood workforce, but it does take some training. Healthcare would be another example. And then finally, I would just say we've got an initiative now we call Service Plus Tech, where we're trying to expose core members and alums to tech careers on the theory that some will actually go into technology companies or other types of companies and bring with them what they've learned being in the community, or they will go on to careers in nonprofit work or education, and they will have some knowledge of technology and will learn how to code, and they'll bring that to sectors that are going to be badly in need of those skills. So those are just some random thoughts.
I would just add, really briefly, the idea of data plus stories equals proof, right? Because we talked about universities getting more involved in helping us with academic type research. And then there are stories, there are many stories that any of us could tell, people who actually are participating in these experiences can tell them. I think what we should also look at is how the fact that communication is a circle, and today communication is interactive. And so how we communicate the stories and the data and the information will probably have a greater impact, and as much impact as what we're communicating.
Howard mentioned it earlier about this culture of service, and I think that goes both ways in that the culture of service impacts the people who are receiving the services, whether it's students in the K-12 programs or partners, but as well as if you're in the city of Flint and you're talking about Americorps, you've interacted with a service member in some capacity or another. So you have that notion in your mind if you're in a community where service is a thing, beyond just knowing one particular core, there is a culture of service. You know if you're getting a member, they have kind of this kind of standard. Well, within the accelerator itself, one of the targets is, okay, well, since we recognize we're creating this culture of service, we're putting out these number of members, what can we do to provide for them? So when I mentioned the 4 pieces of it, the last piece was really about member and alumni support. So whether it's monthly accelerator meetings that they have, like after Americorps Day, trainings and different skill sets, like providing all of this into the individuals at a regular basis. And it's not on the specific nonprofit that's hosting 2 members or the other one that's hosting 4 members. It's every month we're having these things and we're providing these, and there's professional development through the 2 years, the 1 year, the 2 years, but then afterward there's alumni. So first, there's this knowledge and awareness that, hey, we have this community of service members that are coming out, and then there's the pouring into them in a systemic way that's consistent. Because you can't just pop out one program one time or host a business writing session. It has to be these resources consistently available, and it takes a coordinating agency to really kind of keep that going throughout, to the point where you don't have to set up something new. You're creating every year a new cohort of individuals who are going out into the workforce, and the workforce is ready for them.
And just a couple of quick thoughts. Building on Brian's point, I think the emphasis on the member development side of this and really helping making those linkages for members, I think is critically important. I think that's something that when we look across the country, some programs do that well, but most programs really struggle with that because of resources and maybe not necessarily connections to those types of resources in the community. So I think that that's important. And then I think on Shirley's point about the pipeline work, I think that's really important. So for example, K-12 education, I think we've been really clear about being intentional about pipeline work, but I think in many of the other areas that Shirley mentioned and others, there's opportunity to define those pipelines to really help a member understand, okay, you've done a year of service in this way, so here are the next steps, and really helping them see the vision for that is important. And actually even something that we're exploring at the association level in partnership with our state service commissions is even creating a pipeline for national service professionals. So, maybe you serve as a member and you decide that you want to become a program director someday, maybe you go to a state commission, maybe you go to the corporation or Peace Corps someday, but this idea of actually helping people visualize a career in national service, I think is also an interesting pipeline that we might want to think about as well.
Mr. Casey.
Again, I also want to thank you. This is a fabulous panel, and thank you all for your dedication to this cause. It's really a lot of great ideas. But the thing that struck me in this conversation is how all of you have talked about the importance of place. I'm sure that you put it in your oral testimony, your written testimony. Jaime, you talked about public allies finds leaders who people don't actually think of as leaders, but anybody can be a leader with the right support. Natalye, you mentioned universities are members of communities, and Brian, of course, your accelerator was all place-based. Kaira, you just mentioned often, if you have people from the local community serving in their own neighborhoods and backyards, that's the best thing. You also mentioned Serve America Fellows Program that has never been funded, which could be a way to accelerate. So my question is, if we were going to make, and I also appreciate what you said about Don't Boil the Ocean, and Brian, you put out the 1 million goal, and if we would get to 1 million. So my question is, if we wanted to make some real concrete recommendations on having some demonstration communities to really show what universal service could be like in some places as beacons that could then, and again, if we're right, and this really is transformational, if you really had universal in communities, I think you would see really big change. What would you recommend? And also, how do we convince the Congress and people with research philanthropy too? Because if there's going to be 5,000 more service year positions, people say, well, spread them out around 50 states. It's 100 a state. Whereas really, to get a demonstration committee, you might want to put 2,500 in one and 2,500 in another, and all of a sudden, so I guess 2 parts. One is, maybe we'll start with you, Shirley, since you've really been pushing on this, and then one for everybody. What would you recommend if we were going to put a recommendation in? What are some key elements for a place-based strategy as models, as beacons? And then how do we convince people to do it? Philanthropy, again, often philanthropy like, well, I'll support a service program, but I want to support it in 10 places. What you've done with Mott, Paquin, was great. Or the Congress will say, spread it out, give everybody a little piece. So anyway, we start with Shirley and we'll hear from all of you.
I'm excited about that idea. I hope you will recommend it. I think that there are, if there were a call for communities to raise their hands, I think this has to be voluntary, and it has to involve a leadership group and communities who will, really pull in higher ed employers as well as the nonprofit and service groups and elementary and secondary education and the youth serving organizations, and say, what are our biggest problems here we can solve? How are we going to prepare young people so they do make this commitment? Bring in the military presence that's in the community, whether it's veterans or if there's a base or if there's recruiters or ROTC, et cetera, National Guard, have them at the table. And then think about what would we need to do to move boldly here with new programs, new opportunities. How would we transition everyone, and what would we do to make sure that everyone has a chance to serve? I think if you put some guardrails around it so it does look like what you want, we're going to learn a ton. Make sure some of the communities are rural and mid-sized cities and large cities, and drive some resources there. I think that's the only way we're going to really know if this is a valuable thing to do for 1 million people, is if we do it in a serious, concentrated way for 100,000 people.
And one thing I would say to that is really aligning with what Shirley was saying is supporting the work. A lot of the work is already going on. They're leading in some of the place-based activities that are going on. And with our accelerator, we're providing technical assistance and inviting people to come. But one thing that was really baked into her statement that I think is important is finding the appropriate partners. So if you're really trying to get this off the ground early, forcing it on a place or community won't make as much sense. The Mott Foundation historically has been invested in the city of Flint, period. And so doing a system that says, well, how can service support the city of Flint greater makes perfect sense. We're a place-based organization, it's a passion of ours. Another example I can give is the partnership now that we're moving with Kaira and American Service Commissions we also have a historic focus on after-school education. So how can we do that? So figure out, if you're trying to be place-based, who are the place-based funders? Who are the entities and organizations? Or who are the place-based private organizations that really have a sense of ownership of their place of home when you're doing public-private partnerships? Those are the people to partner with. Those are going to be the ones that kind of stick through it, through the early phases when you're trying to figure it out and amplify it at a much larger level. Because I think the conversations are really already moving forward and the vehicles are in place, but making sure to place in the right places with partners who really buy into that sense of place.
Sure. I would offer, just from personal experience, I happened to be rolling off the National Advisory Board of the Salvation Army, and I was on that board for 9 years. And the Salvation Army was very fortunate to receive a gift from the Crocs, the McDonald's owners. And that gift was to invest tens of millions of dollars in cities around the country, but the cities had to have a matching grant, right? Had to have matching funds. And so the model was, and I can't speak specifically to the model, but this is the concept of the model, that you can obviously reach out to the Salvation Army to get more information. But it was, they looked at certain communities, and so there was a criteria about the type of community, low-income community that they would actually make an investment in. And then they assessed the level of readiness for that community to actually receive the grants. And the way that you assess the readiness for the community is to say, okay, if you want, let's just say, this is random, this is not the actual number, $2 million, then you have to put up $10 million. And not only do you have to put up $10 million, but we need to see a number of community leaders that will be around the table from a governance perspective to help support this, let's just say, 2, 3, 4 years out, so that there was some view and line of sight to the fact that not only can we get this off the ground and up, but there's at least a commitment by leadership to support it for the first 3 fiscal years or 5 fiscal years. And so, my recommendation would be to look at some models where they're that are place-based and draw some insights from the learnings there.
I would, so echoing everything that folks are talking about, in terms of place-based, I think something that I think about a lot and something that we're working on at Public Allies is this notion, whenever you're trying to design around a really complicated issue, it's really difficult to do unless you've got sort of creating constraints. If they don't already exist, or creating constraints that allow you to tackle the problem and work backward from it, right? And place-based is one sort of approach. Another way of looking at it is sort of a time box approach. And the way we are looking at it at Public Allies increasingly, I was talking about future of work and citizenship. The reason we're looking at that is that we believe that the next 10 to 15 years are going to shape the next century in so many ways, and that we're at an inflection point in our country. And so many of our institutions are sort of being reinvented, and these lines are being blurred, and lots of displacement, as we know, but not just displacement in terms of driverless cars. That's one thing, but it's also just a whole mindset and skill set that we need to have. And if you look at it, and it depends on what report you're looking at, and there are different ways of looking at the last industrial revolution and how long that transition took. But if you look at it, it's really frightening. It makes you realize that to meet this moment, as our institutions are struggling to try to catch up with how quickly things are changing, it would require this massive upskilling, an unprecedented massive upskilling of a large number of young people at an unprecedented pace, right? It's like this Marshall Plan-esque kind of dynamic, right? And it feels like people are looking at different parts of development, and this requires a cross-sector initiative, being very proactive about it. This is way beyond something public allies alone would be able to do, but we're using it as a framing for how we see our work over the next decade. And we're being bold and saying this is how we want to move the needle within this time frame, and then we're saying what does our foundation look like within a short period of time, three years, what does it look like, how do we prepare ourselves for that? I say all this because as we're having these conversations, if you're looking for demonstration points and ways of marshalling around this and sort of a broader call to action that allows you to allocate resources accordingly, that's another thing to consider. Is sort of, again, it's a time constraint, recognizing where we are in history, and there's no better way of testing how effective national service would be in terms of beyond like just really needing the moment to make sure that the country makes it through, accelerates the pace at which it adjusts to these transitions.
I was just going to say, so I believe like the case-based approach is a really thoughtful way of doing this, and I think a lot of our state service commissions are interested in thinking about this as well, because it makes sense to them to be able to put an influx of resources into a community and see what might happen with that. Some of the key things I think that would be important with that kind of approach, though, is I do think having the communities make a commitment and having a plan. So we're not just saying, hey, here's $100 million or whatever that number may be, but what's the plan for those resources? I think that's critically important. Building on some of the other points too, I think having commitment of leaders across sectors, so not just elected officials, but also nonprofit leaders, corporate business leaders, philanthropic leaders in that area as well. I think that's really important. Having local funders committed, so I think a federal investment in this way would be really, really nice, but I think having that local commitment, whether it be from philanthropy, individual donors, corporate philanthropy as well, I think those are going to be important building blocks. And I also, when I kind of think about how you might do this in a community, I think having some core programs or kind of backbone programs that can probably scale pretty quickly is going to be important. But then I also would say that having, again, flexibility, right? So having some opportunity to really test new models, or put a fellow in a nonprofit and see what happens with it, or do those types of things where it may not be part of the current structure, but would really allow for some of that flexibility and innovation that I think would be important to thinking about how do you really take national service into a community and really change the face of that community in a very positive manner.
Thank you.
Great, so that concludes the first round of questions. I hope everybody's hanging in there okay. The red light was on a little bit longer than I would like, so the second round, I'm going to ask the commissioners and participants to tighten it up a little bit to be respectful of everybody's time. So one of the things I mentioned, and I'll put myself on the clock for 5 minutes. One of the things that I mentioned in my opening statement is the idea that we're looking at some new, out-of-the-box, unique fundraising type ways to find resources. One of those things could potentially be a congressionally chartered foundation. So I'd like your opinion on what you see as some of the risks and or benefits, and if one was created with an overarching broad fundraising mandate to support national service, do you think there are foundations and corporations out there that would contribute? Why don't I start down here with you?
So I think the idea of a national foundation is an interesting one, and I think that there is potential there. I think what would be, we need to better understand how would the foundation actually give out its money. And so I think that that's really important to kind of think about that piece of it. Is it as matched to existing federal resources? Is it investing in innovative strategies? What that might look like, I think, would be important, because I think that's ultimately what's going to attract funders to it. So them understanding where that money is going, I think is going to be important. My sense is there are national funders that would be interested in this idea. And so I think that you could create a culture amongst foundations and others to really contribute to that. But I think, again, them understanding where that's going to go as well. And I think that that also want to make sure that the money is going across the country as well. So it's not just urban areas, it's not just rural areas, that there's definitely a commitment to spreading those resources throughout the country. And I think probably a focus on national funders. I would want to encourage local funders to stay local in this work, because I think that the resources are scarce in many respects, and so we want to keep that investment local if we could. But national funders contributing to a national effort makes sense to me.
And similar to one of my previous answers, I think it really comes down to the funder on who would support this. while there might be some interest, we see private sector and other foundations really getting behind ideas that directly align with their funding strategies already. So it would really come down to the funder in that case.
Yeah, we know that there are about 1.5, maybe up to 1.8 million nonprofits that currently exist, and last year there was over $400 billion that was contributed to nonprofits, and so we think the idea might be a little premature, and perhaps it would be best to scan the current ecosystem of nonprofits and giving to see whether or not the objective could be furthered through the current giving ecosystem.
I don't think I've ever disagreed with Kaira, but I'm going to disagree 100%. I can't think of a single funder who would actually want to give money to this, and I'll tell you why. There are no national service funders. We get them by talking about workforce and education, like every other. We now have 20 funding areas we're pursuing. It's really hard. One of the big barriers would be people perceiving that this is displacing government investment, and I think that would not be appealing. And then finally, the national infrastructure that's currently supporting this field is about a half a dozen organizations, and half of them have undergone staff layoffs in the last 2 years. It's a really hard space to be in. So if there is some magic funder out there that wants to really capitalize a federal related foundation, I would think that would be really cool, but I just think it would be a heavy lift and I wouldn't put my energy there.
I think I'd have to echo that. It's challenging to raise money philanthropically for a lot of what we're doing. It's, everything we're talking about in terms of framing and messaging and mental models, all of that. It's, to the 10th power when you're trying to think about this on a philanthropic level and what a sustainable revenue mix looks like. And I would say that if we're already thinking about how to increase the living allowance, we're trying to think of how to supplement it, through philanthropy. And if the federal government is out there doing the same thing, going from the same sources, my concern would be about the potential for cannibalizing a limited pool. And I think that'd be counterproductive. Thank you.
Let me dial back a little bit to the rich conversation we had about Flint. There's been sort of this inflection point that Shirley is summoning us to be bold on, but there's so many threads of what Brian Stevenson would say is proximity. You have to be proximate to the issues you're working on, or the collective impact of the Stanford Journal on Social Innovation. It's just so many, we're almost at an inflection point. So now maybe I could turn to you, because in your testimony, you said something very interesting to me. You said 76% of those surveys have CEOs, so it's well respected, 75% globally. And you cited the Starbucks program.
Well, that site was from the Edelman Trust, the 2019 report of the Edelman Trust Barometer. Right.
It's a very interesting one. In the Starbucks Service Fellows example is that exists, that some of our commissioners have huge interest in the beverage, at least.
I know you single-handedly support
One of those 36 is. But speak to me about other ways, and you're uniquely positioned here with us today, to speak to other ways where the corporate sector could increase its engagement in this space.
Well, yes, thank you. And one of the things that, well, first of all, the corporate sector is engaging. They're just engaging in a different manner because we at Points of Light recognize Civic 50, and so these are 50 of the top most civically minded corporations. Many corporations have a day of serving. They offer volunteer time off. So there are a number of ways that corporations are currently engaging. What we find exciting about this model in particular is the fact that when you think about service and national service in particular over a 12-month period, fellows typically have to only commit to that job or that role. In this particular case, the company is actually investing in their part-time employees and saying, we will help supplement your income, which will give you 40 hours of work. The hours that they work with a nonprofit are not equal to the hours that they work for at the store, but they're gaining additional skills. And so we believe that to the extent a company could afford that, not every company could afford that. And so we don't know that this is the absolute sustainable model, but there's a good start here. To actually invest in your employees, you have these discretionary funds, and send your employees out into communities. And so we think that it's a good model. We also think that partnering with someone like CNCS, where potentially there could be matching funds, if you wanted to extend this to other companies, where these companies have consumer-facing employees, and they wanted to invest in their employees and give them more opportunities for growth, but not necessarily in their workplace. Perhaps there's some model where we would work with CNCS or other institutions to figure out where the sources of funds coming from to make this sustainable and to grow the model. But we're really excited about it.
Respond.
I just want to continue this conversation because if we are to bring the sort of the corporation, the philanthropic, the nonprofits, government all together, and we create this great synergy, how do we then market it to the American people? What this is, national service. Right? We understand it here. At least for me, I've learned what it is as part of this commission. But for the average American, understanding what national service is and why should I, as a taxpayer, provide money to a corporation to have national service, or why shouldn't the philanthropic community pick up this, responsibility? What's in it for the American taxpayer? How do we explain that to them? Because in the end, all our recommendations are going to Congress and to the president and to the American people, and we have to explain to them why this is important, not just to this community or to other communities, but your community, and you as part of that community and part of this country. This is why it's important. So how would we go about doing that? Sorry.
I'm happy to make this case all the time. So we always talk about three things. We start with changing lives. If there are young people out there for whom this will be a transformational experience, that they will go on and find careers and do important things. And it may be people who otherwise have no other pathways. So we talk about that. We talk about the problems that we can solve at scale if we have this type of human capital available to communities. There's so many things that robots can't do that people can do, and it's everything from doing peer coaching to help end opioid addiction to just mucking out the house after disaster. So we talk about that, and then we finally talk about that we need public spirited leaders for this country, and anybody who's feeling that underserved, and when we think about who's going to be in charge in another 20, 30 years, we want them to have had this experience. So that's how we make it.
Any other thoughts?
Sure, I would just offer that it really depends on your audience, and to Shirley's point, clearly articulating the value proposition to that audience. And so I would just offer for corporations in particular. Today's consumers are activists. Today's employees are activists. They expect companies to have some type of social agenda, and that social community agenda should be consistent with the business interests. But you can't stand on the sidelines. And so for companies in particular, why this will be important is because it helps with employee recruitment, it helps with retention, it helps with market positioning, it helps with brand improvement. And so there are a number of ways that companies could benefit from being engaged in partnerships that support national service.
And one approach could be also it's about when we talked a lot about this place-based work and culture of service, looking at a small area, but looking at the country as a whole, the federal government could tap into the young people's kind of this social consciousness with a campaign of sorts that promotes national service as a way to make the world a better place and gain valuable skills, plus getting this education. There could be a targeted communication approach that goes through Of course, then it comes down to resources, that versus another, but that could be a strategy.
Good. Please.
I'll be quick. So I think that everything that's been shared, I think is on point on that. I think that the other piece here too is given the inflection point where we are in our country right now, this idea of building our civic infrastructure again, I think that there's something important there. I recognize that may not resonate with everyone, but I believe that there is something to be said about our history of volunteer engagement and being involved in our communities, and that national service is a natural extension of that. I think that that is really important for us to think about here. And I think also just the idea that national service is rebuilding communities, and it really is targeting specific priority areas. And I think something that we've seen in recent years is models that are starting to be developed around the opioid crisis. And I think that as new priorities are emerging in this country, national service can be a solution to those priorities. And so I think really, as talking to different folks about what might resonate with them, is also understanding what are those issues and examples of how national service is addressing them.
Just to clarify, when you're saying who are we making the case to, is it, or how do we make the case? Is it to taxpayers that you're describing, or who, to corporations?
Ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Because, the federal government is not going to have the resources to be able to fund this. We're going to rely on a myriad of, whether it's corporations, nonprofits, philanthropics, government agencies. Everybody's going to have to come to the table for this to work.
Yeah.
And so part of that is, from the federal government side, or even from state or local taxpayers, how do we explain it to them? So the person who's sitting at home has no idea what we're talking about, may or may not have known somebody who participated in some sort of service, and we're saying, you know what, this is going to be good for you.
Yeah.
It's like a medicine, but you're going to want to like it.
I think we touched on a lot of points. I think the zeitgeist right now, there's a growing awareness just across the board, right? In terms of there's increased polarity, there's people know it and feel it. There's a sense of despair, frankly, in terms of what to do. And this is felt across every sector. Corporations look at this, feel this way. Government feels this way. Individuals feel this way. And to me, it's a matter of time. There's an urgency around it, right? And to me, it's a framing around the urgency of what everyone's feeling and putting a name to it, and recognizing that it requires everybody to kind of step up. And clearly, corporations are recognizing this. And I think back to what I was, when I was in politics and government, I left, and I was hoping corporations were thinking this way, but they weren't thinking about this the same way. It was just traditional corporate social responsibility. Now it is, like what Michael Porter talked about in terms of shared value partnerships, and the corporations are being much more innovative. And to Mr. Kuhn's point, recognizing that it's critical for their own, that generationally millennials are thinking this way. For their own employees, they have to think this way. This is the future workforce, and this is the way they, as a corporation, who you might think would be most resistant to this, if they're evolving so dramatically in this direction, to me, shows that there's something shifting. And so I think there's this framing around identifying, maybe it's a key issue, and it's identifying a big challenge that we're all going for. And I think that's how I would start to get at it.
I put in the record, this is some marketing material that we've done on our campaign, but it definitely lays out how we would talk about it.
Ms. James?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct my question to Ms. Esgate. So we understand the importance of the state service commissions, and this morning we heard very compelling testimony from Mr. Bugby about the work that One Star does here in Texas across this very large state to support the service activities that are going on here. My question, and I'm interested in knowing, to what extent do the state governors and state legislatures, to what extent are they interested in elevating and expanding? We're talking about expanding national service, whether it be expanding the number of positions or investing in the infrastructure so that we can expand the positions. But I'd like to get a sense from you where the governors are on this, and whether, in your view, there's a place for the federal government to encourage or interact with the governors to further this goal?
Yes, great question. Thank you so much. So I would say that the governors are very supportive of national service, and we've seen that from both parties. So that's been something that I think that we're very proud of, to see that bipartisan support for national service within the states. Now, some governors have taken the next step and are actually proposing initiatives to expand national service in their state. For example, in my written testimony, I talked about California, where Governor Newsom has suggested that they increase the number of Americorps members from basically double, from about 4,000 to 5,000, now to 10,000, and also double the value of the education award within the state with state funds. So I think that that's an example right there. A new governor coming in, having a commitment to this, and actually really working closely with the State Service Commission on this. So many of our commissions are part of the governor's office themselves. And so those commissions are better positioned to work with the governor very closely on these ideas. Other commissions are part of the lieutenant governor's office. The lieutenant governor can take a lead role. For example, in Utah, our commission is part of the lieutenant governor's office, and there's a lot of synergy there between that State Service Commission and the lieutenant governor's office as well. So I think that, part of it is where the commission is located, certainly, but generally we do see that support from governors. Also, increasingly, we're seeing state legislatures also being very interested. So I also mentioned during my testimony some of the new pieces of legislation that we see moving through. So I think the key that we noticed there is that we now have a number of Americorps alumni who are members of state legislatures, right? And so when they get elected, they want to see, how can I support national service in my new role? And so that's actually been very important. So, for example, with the Nebraska legislation to look at exempting the ed award from state tax, that a member, an alum of Americorps, is carrying that legislation and helping to marshal it through that process. So I think that as we continue to see more alumni in elected offices, I think we're going to continue to see that growth and opportunity. But again, over the last 10 years or so, we've seen a lot of governors that have stepped up and said, this is important in my state. I see the power of national service to really impact the communities and the priorities of our state. And so I want to make sure that I'm making commitments to that. The last thing I would just say on this front as well is I think there's a lot of interesting things governors can do within their own cabinet as well. So really challenging their cabinets to say, hey, you are in charge of employment development, so how are we thinking about how employment development and national service can be working together in this particular state? And actually using some of those employment development resources in combination with Americorps and other national service resources to, again, create new opportunities as well. So I think there's a number of ways that governors can kind of pull the string on this, or the thread through, in order to really do this. But I think that we can continue to ramp up governor support, and I think that you as a commission with your national platform can really challenge governors to step up and say, you know what, this is important to us, and we really believe that we should be invested in that way.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Davidson, Dr.
Sure. I mean, when you serve on a commission like this, you're excited, and we're all excited about this. We're all, I think, in agreement on the value of service and things that we've all talked about. We're super excited about the ideas you brought to the table. But at the end of the day, we have to write a report, which we're also very excited about. And that report will probably be delivered about this time next year, hopefully a little bit earlier, maybe February, March, which is an election year. And I'm thinking about, Commissioner Wada asked about, how do we convince people this is important? But let me talk about the intersection of timing and also of message. In your opening remarks, Shirley, you said that this is our moment. And then you also said that our country is falling apart. And Mr. Uzeta, you said there's a sense of despair and that there are big challenges. And so now I'm getting sad. And so I'm wondering, what is the hook? Because this is how public policy works. We're all policymakers and we get this, right? There's always like these ideas swirling around and nobody listens to all of us geniuses that are crying in the dark for years and years and years, whatever the issue is, right? And then something happens and people ask for answers. And then we're all Johnny on the spot with all the stuff we've been talking about for the last 2 decades, right? So what's the spark? What's the thing that's going to get people to say, this is our moment? Why is it our moment? Can you help me understand that?
Sure. It's an interesting thing because there's, in some ways, it's our moment because some things are going well, and this is building on what's really best about America. Are people do want to roll up their sleeves and do things. So part of the moment is the numbers are great. They're across the polling numbers. People across all kinds of demographic backgrounds believe in this when they understand it and it's brought to their attention. So that's key. I think people respond best when you really talk about the opportunity side. That this is about a new social compact where if you invest in your country, your country will invest in you. So although I actually spend a lot of time on the doom and gloom side, this is a tremendously optimistic thing to put forward, which is why so many candidates are gravitating to it. So it's hard to say, like, what is the thing that's going to happen that's going to make this the answer. But I do think one of the things that has happened is people are worried that we're divided too much and that we're not asking enough of people, and that we're not putting these kinds of opportunities forward. So it's a hard message. I don't disagree with that.
I'd say two things. One is that, let me first address the spark piece. The spark is, those are just hard to predict as we know, right? So I remember we would focus on, kind of breakthrough on a specific issue, whether it was anti-discrimination or anti-violence or whatever it was. And I'd say 90% of the time when we actually broke through, it was just in an unplanned way. And so the best you do is you set up an infrastructure and so that you can respond nimbly to opportunities. And so you lay down that foundation, you can respond to take advantage of it. So, and you have to be super attuned to what those opportunities are and run quickly when they come. So I would just say that in general, it's hard to actually package that, like package a viral video or whatever. It's hard to tell. But I think the other side of this, I would say, is that there is doom and gloom in terms of this challenge that we're facing and this inflection point that I was describing earlier. But it's also this huge opportunity because there's so many other trends that you can look at in terms of democratization of communication and education becoming an ecosystem. There's just the need for interdisciplinary skills and the fact that corporations are starting to look at this differently. There are lots of points that you can, and trends that you could harness to say, well, if this is happening and we're at this inflection point in the next 10 to 15 years are going to define, if we believe that the next century, how do we remake it, or how do we redesign things based on what we've learned works and doesn't work? And so, to me, that's incredibly exciting, and there's an opportunity to, instead of shielding ourselves, be proactive about how we want to redesign and take advantage of the moment.
Just briefly, I would say there are a couple things. One is, and I saw this on, I don't know, Good Morning America or Today Show or something like that, so it's real authentic research. That optimism is a muscle and pessimism is a habit. And if you want to increase the muscle, you have to stop the habit, something like that. And so I actually think that, the hook here, from an optimistic perspective, is service is actually happening. It's how we are categorizing it, how we are capturing it. It's happening. It's happening in a number of ways, whether people, how they vote, how they use their voice, through social media, where they spend their money, where they choose to work. All of these different ways people are engaging and providing service. We're just not capturing it. And the United Nations with Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, they issued a report in July last year, 2018, and they said we are not going to accomplish these goals by 2030 unless we get more people involved. And so we need people power, and we need the power of the best in people. And so I would say that it's happening, and we just need to leverage more people sooner, faster to accomplish more in our communities.
With respect to raising awareness of service and the opportunities, we're going to, I want to ask you about the difference between a national campaign and state campaign. So I'm going to give you a big pot of money and tell you that you now have the opportunity to go out and raise awareness in marketing. You get through a website, an advertising campaign, and recruiting a spokesman. Would you create one website and market at the national level, or 50 websites and do it at the state level? With advertising, the same thing, with a respected spokesperson. Is it one? Is it a number at the state level? And understanding that the ideal answer is both. That's not acceptable here. What are the pros and cons of trying to do this at the national level or at the state level?
I'll start. So I do think the answer is both. However, I understand that's not a level answer. So, I think that because we are talking about things in communities, I do think that there is something to be said for local and statewide in that. However, I also recognize that one of the things that we see is that people want to serve in different parts of the country. Like, also something that's very interesting about this idea is that you can go and serve in another part of the country and learn, like, oh, I've always wanted to go to X, and this is a great way for me to learn about that community as well. So I do think that there is, the national piece does have something there. I think that you can bring you're part of a national movement. There's something I think that's very attractive to a lot of folks about that. But I also think that the state piece, because it can really focus on what does it mean to serve in this state? What are those opportunities there? And obviously, from my vantage point, representing state service commissions, I'm going to think about the state part of it there. I do think it provides them an opportunity to really talk about priorities in the state and how people can make an impact in those local communities in a way that would be a little bit more difficult in a national campaign. But I do think a national campaign helps the state campaigns be more successful as well.
I would say it has to depend on the goals. Raising awareness, just generally speaking, about that something exists, that's one approach. And that's nationally, if you can get the word out and everyone's talking about it. But executing a strategy is going to service is local. What's effective and needed in a place, how you develop the specific cores that are there, the way in which they function, the training that's provided. That really has to be informed locally and has to be sensitive to the space. And that's how you address a lot of the issues that were, some of the questions brought up here, and in the earlier session I got a chance to sit in and talk about how do you get more diverse pools, or how do you get pools that are reflective of communities. Like, service has to be structured in a local format. It needs to be responding to the needs and shaping the space. But at the same time, when you're trying to raise that awareness, I think that there's a chance for both. So I'm not saying both, because that wasn't an option, but making sure, whatever we decide, making sure we're executing a service strategy that's really informed locally.
I think you need a centralized campaign, a national centralized campaign. When you think about get tested, don't drink and drive, buckle up, arrive alive, or I think it was the American Heart Association that had a 10-year campaign to lower heart disease in women, and they started the first 3 years just awareness, right? Did you know that heart disease was the #1 killer of women in America, more than X, Y, and Z? And then here are your risk factors. My answer is the campaign should be a national campaign.
So, I'm really struggling with this one. It's a great question. We've tried to do national campaigns before, and they've been really undercapitalized, and they haven't worked. It may be because they were undercapitalized. I think it's hard to find one spokesperson that's going to have that kind of broad appeal, because what's cool about our country is how diverse it is, and somebody might think Chancellor Rapper's the perfect spokesperson, and somebody else might think, you get the problem. I do like the idea of creating some kind of a national template that can be taken down to the community level, so you can say, we had a campaign, it's called for 1 year, this was my office, and you kind of showed really cool different places you can serve, and there's been some customization of that, so programs are taking it and showing for 1 year, this was my office, and that's worked pretty well. So I do think that to make it relevant locally, it'll be important to do that, but I'm actually kind of wary of having a single spokesperson. Also, like, what if the spokesperson has some problem that surfaces? Like, I don't know. I have really anxious about that. That would never happen.
I would say it's hard to come up with something. I think you have to go back and look at what you're trying to solve for. What specifically is the call to action? What's the hope around it? And is there I would think in a campaign framework, and how long can a campaign actually last? You have to really work backward from this specific challenge. And again, it's like we were saying earlier, it's segmenting your audience, and realizing how the folks you want to influence most may look at it, and you have to tailor your message to each of them. So I would just say, it's hard to say national, local in general right now, but some principles around it would be, it seems like it would be something like a national campaign with local plug-in opportunities, anything that allows that call to action, what it is that does allow you to kind of jump with a spark is so key in this scenario, right? And the things that are evolving when you start looking at marketing and engagement and trends and technology, the idea of being able to own something yourself and being able to customize it and running with it, like the ice bucket challenge or whatever it is, those are the things that really sort of take off. And and some would say it's really hard to sort of package those, but there are some principles that are creating campaigns like that. I just think there are a range of possibilities. I would just echo what we talked about in terms of understanding how social media and technology is trending and how you might leverage that today. The kind of campaign I would do now is much different than what I would have done 5 years ago. And so, but it really has to work backward from who you're actually trying to target. And I think it would be a combination of local and national.
So it's unintentional, but this builds perfectly off of John's question. And Kaira, I really want to start with you because one of the things in your written testimony is this idea of a one-stop shop website, basically, that would allow people to understand, sort of, I think you say advertise, basically all national service opportunities, whether they be military or civilian or a variety of things. And I guess one is I'd love to hear more about why you think that's so important. And two, just how would state and local folks, do you think, plug in to that kind of a concept if it were to work?
Yeah, I think it really builds on some of the testimony in your first panel today about the idea about really making sure that the military side as well as the national service side are reinforcing one another. And so I do think that if an individual is interested in serving their country, then being able to go to one place and kind of understand the range of options. Maybe they go there because they think they're interested in national service and actually figure out that maybe military service is a better fit for them or vice versa. So I do think that opportunity to really understand all of the variety of options out there and actually stories and kind of experiences of folks too could be a great way for people to do that. I mean, I do think in the digital age now, it's really important that we do have those resources out there. And I do think, for example, expanding the scope of military recruitment centers to include the national service, that could be a nice complement to that as well. I do think, and kind of building on the last question as well, I do think that if a national campaign is going to happen, also having ways or extensions for the state and local level are an important part of that. So I do think one of the challenges that we have is that national service is very diffuse. If you serve in an education program in Texas and what you might be doing in an environmental program in the state of Washington, that is going to probably be a very different experience too. So I think helping people understand that is really important as well. And so I think that we would have to make sure that a national site could do those types of things. But I think we want to recognize that people are going to come to this from different points of view, different perspectives, and having kind of a place where they were able to do that and help them kind of figure out what's the best path for them as an individual would be very powerful.
Can I just say something about it? Because we run that website, it just doesn't have the military stuff on it. We spent millions of dollars to build it. And I think that there would be a way to adapt it to incorporate both military and we just added the Peace Corps this last week. So there are definitely some shortcomings. I don't think it's perfect. But it also allows for any community to create its own site and just pull in its own position. So Flint, could have it. I think it probably does have one. Our communities each are able to use the functionality to create that. So it wouldn't be hard to incorporate military. It incorporates both Americorps and non-Americorps programs. So there's something to having the ability to search for, I really want to go to California and work on clean energy and be able to find that. What happens now is you get recruited to an individual program like Public Allies, like, pull you in. But if you're not right for public allies or it's not right for you, you don't necessarily know, oh, there's all these other programs you could do.
Ms. Keller.
Thank you. I'd also like to pick up on my colleague, Mr. Kilgan's point about raising awareness. But I'd like to take it down to what I think is probably one of the most hyper-local, formalized versions of community we have, and that's schools, K through 12. And Mr. Larkin, I'd like to start with you, please. We're from the federal government, and we're going to help. And that's where our recommendations are going to go, right, to the president and to Congress. So from the lofty heights of the federal level, how can federal assistance be brought to bear to introduce and increase awareness of service programs, national service programs with middle schools and high schools?
Well, one model that we have locally that I think has been really effective was we have a core that's based in the school. So if you're a student right now, if you're a sixth grader at an elementary in Flint, you put on the flag football team, your coach is an Americorps service member. If you participate in a summer camp program, or if you participate in the community education work after school, like you're interacting in all these ways. If you think about the pivotal people throughout your life who helped you become who you are, in Flint, there's a high likelihood that that's a service member, that's a service person. How can we set up one kind of understanding a model that incorporates it in K-12 that's responsive and respectful for the existing space, recognizing the existing space of educators and the structure of administrators, but how do you embed service within that? And then inform, be really intentional with the informing of students about those opportunities and those experiences. That person that you confide in chess club is actually here through Americorps. They're going to be here through the summer program, and when you get to be their same age, you have these opportunities too. So being really intentional about putting it right, when we're thinking about K-12, especially when we're thinking about the really early ages, they believe kind of what they see. If you go to a third grade classroom right now and ask them what they want to be, they're going to name either something they've seen on TV or something someone's related to them. Not too many people are going to want to be an urban planner, like when I was in school. Because you don't see it, And so I think from the highest levels is putting a service member in front of them who's consistent and providing space, and then explaining what that service is, either through branding, whether it's the simple the branding of wearing the shirt. So they say, oh, well, you're a person with an age just like that person. What is it? Be consistent with that space, and then expand it from there. But it's been really, really effective in our community, and it's been through all of our.
Can I follow up with you? You're talking about the interaction of the individual young people.
Yes.
Do you have anything that you could share about how the placement of those service people influences their parents and their families in their regard for service?
Well, we've seen some examples actually where my colleague likes to speak about myself and the families written up in my written testimony is like the first family of service because my mother was involved and my sister and everything. But we have a lot of people who are coming through right now who are starting, and then now their parents are coming through for a term of service. Similar to what a lot of people said, there's no upper age limit on service, and it's not. Well, we have the unique opportunity here, and this goes back to a previous question about whether it's been in the room. We have the unique opportunity that I would say the bulk of the American public is not soured on service. They're not unengaged because they turned it down and don't want to do it. It's like, being exposed. So we've seen a lot of that where young people are getting engaged, and then a year later their parents, or they're serving together with parents, or they're serving with peers, they're engaging in that space. And then some of these resources that we're providing with, there's a program through a middle school called Girls on the Run, and then they're talking about healthy behaviors and healthy attitudes, and then now how some of their families are utilizing some of these same things. And then when we have festival, 5K races and things like that, you see the whole family is coming out because we provide transportation from the school site where core members there, and then their family for the first time is like, I never really supported this cultural institution and knew I could come here. I never did those things. And so we're seeing it happen organically. I wouldn't say that it's prescriptive that there's a carry on program or there's a bring your family along program, but we're seeing, again with that, not to overuse, culture of service, that people are recognizing and engaging it in more and more ways than we ever imagined before.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Case?
So I want to pivot and start initially with not only this question about international service, So you've had affiliates with Points of Light in over 30 countries. Youth Build has expanded to multiple countries. Wendy Kopp started Teach for America. She's now leading Teach for All. It's in 40 countries. Barbara Bush, the granddaughter of President Bush, we're here at his school. And we'll honor here started Global Health Corps to have young people serve doing health work abroad. What can we do to, from your experience, to incentivize or support more service internationally or overseas? Would it be a good idea to have a grant program, somewhat like Americorps, but for programs that want to operate internationally? Could be out of the corporation, maybe out of USAID, or what have you learned from the Points of Light work that you've done globally?
Yes, it's a great idea, and thank you for the question. Actually, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I was in India, and we had, it was our global meeting, our annual global meeting. We were in New Delhi, and there were leaders, executive directors from about 22 NGOs from around the world. They're talking about shared problems, shared experiences, really being innovative and creative with each other. And then learning more about our NGO that we work with in India is I Volunteer, one of the largest volunteer organizations in the country. A couple of things that we learned, and this was just from travel. Like, did you know that by 2028, India is going to be the largest country in the world? They will be larger than China. They'll have almost 1.5 billion people. That's just in 9 years, right? just in 9 years. So we say, as goes India, goes the world, and it's important for them to get it right. The point of this is that international travel and international connections expand us in unexpected ways. We come back enlightened and with greater sensitivities and probably expanded perspectives. Points of Light, in particular, in nonprofits, are always looking for human resources, and so we think expanding national service and working with nonprofits that have global reach and placing those core members in those communities help build stronger communities globally, but then also when the leaders come back, they help build stronger communities locally. And so we think it's an excellent idea, and I'm expanded just from 3 weeks ago.
Thank you.
I'll just add that I think that is, as we're considering what the future looks like and the need and what the skills are that young people are going to need to fly, the ability to think globally and because we're so connected digitally is going to be so critical. And depending on how you're looking at the research, so the idea of creating opportunities for somebody to go globally because it around service would be really unique and a way of connecting the dots that would be very powerful. And it's a really, I think that would be a big value out of national service to underserved communities in particular.
I think that, so some of the programs you mentioned are great because they are taking people who live in those countries and enabling them to serve in those countries, right? So the question is how many Americans should be serving abroad, right? And I think that a lot more could, because of the way the federal structures are grown up. Peace Corps is one program. It's not helping necessarily many of the NGOs that might want to start something, and there's been funding from the State Department. So I think it would have to be an intentional effort to kind of, and I think there's a lot of potential there, but there's some things to weigh as you're thinking about it.
Great. Well, that ends round 2. So thank you very much for hanging with us. Esgate, Mr. Larkin, Paquin. Now, Mr. Uzeta, really appreciate the time today and valuable information that you've provided the Commission. A lot of food for thought. I will now dismiss the panelists. We're welcome to take seats in the front row there if you'd like, and open up the time for public comments. The Commission is committed to transparency and openness with the public. In keeping with these principles, the Commission intends to provide the public with an opportunity to deliver public comments during our hearings. As a reminder, in order to provide the greatest opportunity for as many participants to offer a comment as would like, public comment is limited to a 2-minute period per person. As noted on our website, sign up for public comment took place between the opening of registration and the start of this hearing. When you signed up, you received a number ticket. To ensure fairness, tickets were randomly drawn. We'll call out the ticket numbers and ask that when your number is called, please come forward and make a line behind the microphone located to my right or your left and provide your comment. If time does not permit, well, it's not going to be the case because we've only got 6 people wanting to make comments, so we'll have plenty of time. Additionally, if you have any written statements that you would like to submit for the record, please provide them to the staff at the registration desk. So, in order, number 6018, 6021, 6017, 6020, 6019, and 6022. Did everybody go home? So during your comment, please be aware of the lights in front of me. The light will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining. Your regular time is expired. You'll also hear a buzzer. Asking you please introduce yourself to the commission and any affiliation you might have before making your comment. Sir.
Commission members and Mr. Chairman, I'm Harold Woods, Senior Director of SOSAmerica.org and Civil Service Over Self. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you a few thoughts with you. As a retired businessman and concerned about the need for continuing renewal to our country, I commend the Mesoamerica initiative to you as a big part and solution that you are charged with. General Bolling, as you probably know, testified before you in Washington, D.C. some time ago. And since I live here in Texas, he called me and asked me to run over here real quick because he's in Washington right now. But I take this opportunity to emphasize that the military is the most respected institution in the nation, yet only a small percentage of our young men and young ladies qualify physically and mentally for all volunteer service. We most assuredly need to expand the opportunity for the military, and SOS America advocate an affordable 1-year, small unit military experience. Imagine mixing geography backgrounds in ages 18 and 26 in that unit of young people whose physical and mental requirements will be based on the ability to take care of themselves versus the strenuous requirements of all volunteer force. They would train and serve in platoons of 30, companies of 100, and respond on demand to the needs of the services, Guard, Reserve, federal, and state agencies. Shared values and experiences affirming a reality that they serve, that this is their earned benefit and the benefit to our nation. It's all about nation building in America, and I commend to you all, SOSAmerica.org, Service Over Self. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we can have a copy of your typed remarks there for the record?
Yes, I will.
Great, thank you very much. Any of the other ticket numbers still present? If you are, please come forward. Get just line up, queue up behind the mic.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Shirley. I am a first-year Masters of International Affairs student here at the Bush School. I'd like to bring up something that might have been mentioned earlier, but might relate to that a little bit more. I think the foundation of public service, at least in my view, and perhaps many here in this room and across the country, is really the protection of our rights within our founding documents. I think when people see that rights are being protected, whether it's free speech, whether it's freedom of religion, freedom to petition, etc., I think people will not only see other different points of view and like to pitch in, but they will also see that there is the hope that this country will be a major force in protecting human rights, protecting all these liberties, and we're able to have a much more civil conversation. I think there's a lot of polarization going on right now. And unfortunately, a number of institutions out there, whether they be educational institutions or perhaps even political institutions, are, in my view and many people's view, really shutting down certain parts of free speech because they think it's offensive or because it's something that they disagree with. But I do encourage the Commission and others to consider any sort of measures or proposals that would support free speech across the country to ensure that we have this sort of discussion. So thank you all.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Please introduce yourself and any affiliation. Provide your comment.
Sure. Hi, my name is Park Smith. I'm the CEO for American Youth Works, and where we run several conservation corps in Texas, Louisiana, disaster relief programs, and a youth build program in Austin. What I wanted to just speak to a few of the points today and share a few ideas. This idea about how do we approach national awareness versus this local awareness, and I think it is really that combined messaging that we need to continue to strike on, which says we have let's just say something like national service, engaging locals to make a difference in your community, and showing those images that people would understand are happening in each of these communities across the country, and then here's how you engage with your locals. So it really needs to be a dual message, because we've seen that when we perform in disaster relief, at times we found that the sort of the federal message is a little bit scary in some of our rural communities in the South. Your welcome is not as always as great. But when we wear our Texas Conservation Corps shirt and we show up, then they feel like these are young people who are from our community and they're helping us, and they're here, and it's just a different level of reception. And so it's just recognizing that people are motivated by local issues, and yet the national awareness is really helping draw some attention and support in a bigger way. Thinking about member development, really helping the programs have the opportunity to pay attention to the industry-recognized certifications. That's something that Youth Build's been really strong at. The Conservation Corps are providing wildland firefighting certificates and other things that will move them into career pathways. And so just highlighting that opportunity to get industry-recognized certifications is an important aspect to remember. And then in terms of expanding in a bigger way, our communities are in need of significant infrastructure repairs. We have backlog maintenance on our public lands, in our city parks, in our county and state lands, even our roads and bridges. These areas where young people can gain skills, help the local community with their needs. And some of the funding can come from city infrastructure. Some of it can come from the National Service Initiative, and combining those together can make a significant difference. We found that the National Park Service did a study that found that conservation corps were able to save 65 to 85% of the cost of other ways of either using some of their own staffing or using external contractors to do this kind of work, because we've got young people who are motivated and willing to live in a tent rather than a hotel at night. So per diems are a lot less. There's ways in which you can leverage those dollars together and make a bigger impact, encouraging those folks to work together.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Heck and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I'm Mary Grace Landrum. I'm a state service commissioner here in Texas with the One Star Commission appointed by the governor of Texas. I'm also an former elected school board member in a district with over 35,000 students, 56% of whom are economically disadvantaged, 52% are English language learners, and two nonprofit agencies have been very helpful in the past with supporting these students with after-school programs, including tutoring. So they've enabled and increased the capacity, their capacity through Americorps programs. Unfortunately, they no longer participate in Americorps programs due to administrative burden, they've told me. Their need that they've identified is to streamline the application process, reporting, and funding administration. My hope is that we'll be able to do that, maybe with a new transformation or through the new transformation plan, and that we'll still be able to keep the really robust evaluation and support that's provided to the programs. I happen to chair our program committee and continue to be impressed with the processes that we have in place for doing that. I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you that I'm from Houston and that I particularly appreciate that without the National Conservation Corps members and the Americorps members, our recovery would not be where we are today, even though it's still ongoing. I was at an event last night and I had to Houston City Council members say, please advocate for increases to NCC, and thank you to our members. So we deeply appreciate that. And I'd like to end with a story from one of the faith-based small nonprofits who's still working. They're working in a community with 350,000 individuals in Katy, Texas, which is right adjacent to Houston. And their executive director said he's raised $300,000 in the last month to help rebuild the 15,000 homes that are still uninhabitable just in that small part of Houston. Unfortunately, he's only able to spend so far $106,000 because he doesn't have the field volunteer administration, the site coordination, the construction logistics, and the planning available to him to actually spend those dollars that he's already raised. That's the kind of work that NCCC does and provides, and we deeply appreciate it. So please consider that. Lastly, I have 2 quick seconds, your thoughts, your question about the national campaign. I'd like you to think about the fact that you might want to look at a YouTube video and or a TED Talk by Simon, S-I-N-E-K, Sinek. And it's how to tell your story. And most of the time, when most of us, myself included, talk or tell a story to someone, we start with what do we do, how do we do it, and maybe why we're going to do it. Unfortunately, the part of the brain, according to his research, that makes decisions about taking action is that part of the brain that needs the why question answered. So you might think about why do we need to do it in framing that campaign, and then answer the other 2. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much for being here. Are the other ticket holders still here? No? Okay, well, if anybody else that's in the audience has suddenly been moved to want to make a comment after hearing a great discussion, anybody want to offer a comment? Come on up, you got time. All right. First victim.
My name is John Harper. I am a member of the NCCC. And I just wanted to say that I'm here because I did not get into the school of my choice, and my parents had offered NCCC as a gap year. That's a way to somewhat discover myself and what I want to do. And I did not picture myself of doing this even during CTI. I was somebody who could not barely read a tape measure when I started my first project, and now I feel like I can just build my own house. And I saw it during CTI and during now that most Corps members still feel like they are just not able to do what NCCC expects them to do, and I feel like that's mainly because they have a lot of self-doubts. Something I had when I was in CTI, and something that I overcome when I started working on my round 1 and round 2 projects. I'm now actively trying to apply for a second term because I had such an adventure so far. I think that when you are branding or advertising NCCC or public servant in general, you should really try to make it seem like anybody could do it. Make it seem like you don't need this skill or talent or knowledge to be a public servant. It just takes the will to do something about a problem.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other public comments and there being no other business before the commission,